If you didn't know, the Backrooms movie, known for its liminal space horror, was released about a week ago now, and lots of people online have had different thoughts about it. Some saying the producers did a really good job for only having a budget of 10 million and already making 140 million within a week. But other people saying that it just didn't live up to expectations. Anyway, this video is going to be me talking about my opinions on the Backrooms movie and why it was so controversial. So, let's get into it. It starts off like any other Backrooms footage. A person going in wearing a yellow hazmat suit from the company we now know as Async Research Institute, or ARI for short. Their job is to look for new areas and map out the layout of the Backrooms, but as we see in the beginning, he's not alone. When he notices that, he attempts to call for backup, but realizes he's too late. For me, this was an amazing start to the movie, especially with the VHS effect. It just gives an eerie feeling before the movie actually starts, and has a very immersive aspect to it. Now cutting back to reality, a store owner, aka the main character, Clark, who owns a not so successful store named Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire, which we will come back to later. But Clark got dumped by his girlfriend, basically leaving him to drinking alcohol, which he speaks to a therapist about, named Mary, which appears later again in the movie. Clark then gets an electrician to fix the lights, which when opening the power box finds two switches leading to nowhere. Curious, Clark pressed it, but nothing happened. Later that night, the lights start flashing downstairs. Clark makes his way down and switches the power on and off. When heading back up, we see him encounter the first part of the Backrooms, a small crevice in the wall which he no-clips into. After doing this, he did what any of us would do: look around. He then proceeds to no-clip every night to see what new areas he can find. Then, he goes to see Mary, the therapist, and tries to tell her about it. Obviously, she thought he was insane, but didn't know there was truth behind the story he was telling. That night, Clark goes into the Backrooms with his two employees, which aren't very important. Clark ties a rope to one of them, and tells them to explore a room down a dark slope. Not thinking much about it, he does it, and then begins to hear growling noises. Without even looking back, he shouts to pull him up, and when getting back to his feet, the creature begins to tug the rope, ultimately pulling him down and killing him, followed by the other employee and Clark getting dragged down too. Then we go back to Mary, who is confused why Clark hasn't come to her last few sessions. Curious, she goes to his store. After calling out his name, the same thing happened. Lights flickered downstairs, leading her to find the door that Clark made before he disappeared. When no-clipping through, she finds Clark, but due to what we think is him losing his sanity, because he has been stuck there for so long, he strangles Mary, causing her to pass out. A couple hours later, she wakes up in a chair, with Clark on the other side, and very uncanny distorted human faces being surrounded around the room, which we'll touch on again later. They then talk about the role-playing exercises that they do at therapy, and Clark begins to get angry, but then in the doorway appears Captain Clark, which is basically a clone of Clark taken from his distorted memories, basically pointing to the fact that his store never sells and basically using this to haunt him. I thought this was a very good detail that really zooms in on Clark's personal life, where he is obsessed with making his store good again, but comes to a reality that it will never be the same. The entity leans into Clark, actually making it seem like they're going to hug each other, but ending in the entity biting Clark's shoulder and Mary fleeing. After, Mary and Captain Clark have a chase scene where at the end we see the two on the ground, Captain Clark trapping her, but she manages to use a weapon to defend herself against the entity, letting her break free. She then wakes up in the ARI facility, which I said about at the beginning. She has walked through corridors where we see the entity getting treatment. Then Mary goes into a room and sits down with what looks to be a scientist that actually had some screen time before this happened, but it wasn't very important, just him reacting to the news of Clark in the Backrooms. Anyway, they sit down and talk about what happened and the entity, and then they bring up Clark, which we will come back to shortly. After that, The movie comes to an end with what looks to be Mary in a chair, but her face is distorted and the movie ends. Now, I will cover the details you missed in the trailer.
I found something. In the store.
Okay. What did you find?
The place. I found a place.
Hello? Anyone there?
Look, I know how this sounds, but you gotta understand, it's massive in there.
I'm not saying I don't believe you.
Okay, I'm gonna come back here with proof.
All right, you feel me? Yeah.
Follow my lead.
Clark, what is this?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I've been there every night since I found the place, and I still barely scratched the surface. All right, just take it slow.
Oh my God.
Pull me up, pull me up, pull me up! What do you see?
All these rooms. This place builds them.
It's like a maze. It just goes on and on.
Sometimes I'm scared I'll get lost.
Clark, can you hear me? I don't understand. What is this?
It's beautiful. Am I right?
Hello?
There wasn't really much to uncover in the trailer, apart from Clark's obsession and almost sense of addiction he has to explore the backrooms, and how the entire layout is made after him. For example, the pirate wheels on the wall. In the movie, he also takes chairs from a pile of chairs back into the real world, which could be an imitation of how successful his store used to be before modernization occurred. Now, there are lots of conspiracies focusing on the backrooms, but I will name and explain 3 just from the movie. Lots of people are saying this just purely because Clark was in the backrooms for a long time, which could have driven him mentally insane and turned him into a monster. But how is he Captain Clark when Clark is literally in the movie? Well, people online have said that the real Clark is stuck in a null zone, which is basically a glitch in reality causing him to be stuck, and the backrooms, which is known to be a living MRI scanner, used all of his distorted memories and created a harmful entity which shares the same mind as Clark. So if you watch the Backrooms movie, you would know about the mural on the wall when Mary first arrives, and who actually drew it. We think it was Clark. While he was trapped in the backrooms and being mentally torn apart, he drew this in a state of confusion. The mural references the haunting mantra, "Tables don't bleed blood," which was shown in the original Kane Parsons series. The image shows what looks to be Pirate Clark holding a person up to a window, which brings us to our next conspiracy. Leading from our last conspiracy, if you watch the movie, we have a couple scenes where Mary was a child and her mother, who always warned her to never look out the window. She suffered from paranoia and schizophrenia, which is why she kept her windows barricaded with newspapers. She stopped Mary from opening windows and looking outside to shield her from a cruel reality. It represents avoiding the confrontation of trauma because her mother was too afraid of the outside world. She trapped herself and her daughter inside, creating a physical cage that mirrored the windowless, oppressive confines of the backrooms themselves. This could be because her mother actually went to the backrooms herself and managed to escape, but is still left with distant haunting memories of what actually happened. Overall, my opinion on the movie is very high. I feel like people didn't like it because of the confusion behind the storyline, and that it also wasn't a typical horror movie, more of a disturbing, uncanny movie. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video and want more, make sure to like this video and comment if you have watched the movie. And that's all from me. Peace.